Alrighty everyone, hello, and welcome back to another episode of My Nonsense, Halloween edition, and maybe also a little tiny bit of B-Log's nonsense. Hi B.O.B! Come on! Oh, there he is! Oh no! This is B-Log, he is my pigeon, and he's always on the lookout for a fight to start, and apparently we're starting it now. But before I head out to the festivities today, in my classic, old school Slavic witch fit, we are going to talk a little bit about how to level up your magic, like for real, like actually. I've had a few people ask me about this on TikTok, and I was making a couple videos here and there when I realized I could really just make one solid, expose of the situation. But before we get into all that, hold on. Let me remind you of what goes on here, okay? My name is Sarah Stresen. I am a Christian witch content creator, writer, educator, specifically a writer of this book right here, Discovering Christian Witchcraft, which is pretty much a one-stop shop to understanding what the hell a Christian witch even is and why. Goes over Bible verses and what they actually mean based on their proper socio-political context and language. Goes over all those kind of starting skills and tools that you might want to develop in witchcraft. Goes over things like angels and demons and other weird little spirits and saints. Goes over all kinds of cool stuff like that. So definitely check it out if you haven't already. And also be excited because its sequel, Discerning Christian Witchcraft, is coming out this December. And in fact, just today, I uploaded the manuscript to get a proof copy. Oh my goodness. Which means soon, we will have an actual printed item to hold up here. For me as a writer, that's always when it feels real, you know what I mean? But if you don't want to grab a book just yet, by all means, just go ahead and like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell, because I do post one of these every single week. And we talk about all kinds of topics, just like this. Hi, Bobby! No. But for those of you who are not new here, welcome back and thank you so much for joining me again. And I'll remind all of you that if you want these videos 2 weeks early and ad-free, all you gotta do is head over to my Patreon, where I post these videos and a whole other bunch of stuff all week long, every week. With all that said though, let's talk a little bit about what leveling up our magic might realistically even look like. Come on, Bib. Come on. Oh, why are you being an evil man? I don't know what's gotten into him recently, honestly. Is this what you want? I found the problem. Oh my god, I'm surrounded by men.
No, you're not. That one is a bird.
This is a man. But, with this topic of witchcraft and all that kind of power, you may have heard me say a few times on this channel that as a Christian witch, power is not really the point. So what am I talking about when I'm talking about getting more powerful magic? First and foremost, what I'm really talking about when I say more powerful, I don't mean like you can do 1,000,002 things that you want to do, that you can start flying or, just immediately destroy all your enemies or anything like that. When I say more powerful magic, I just mean more stable, more secure, more effective, really. And a lot of that has to do, first and foremost, with what you're even using your magic for. So I guess we could start there. Now, when you start on the witchcraft journey, especially those beginner books, the first thing you're going to find is a lot of the kind of more, I don't want to say goofy, but definitely more of the kind of the more theatrical side of witchcraft, where it's talking all about, your spell ingredients and all your spell formats and your tools and all the cool, shiny, fun baubles and toys and other things that draw people to witchcraft to begin with, because it looks fucking fun. And for all intents and purposes, I mean, if we think about it, science back in the day really looked a lot like witchcraft, right? All that occult science especially was a lot of basically witchcraft, but by men of the church who thought that they were better than the witches they were condemning, whatever though. But right, making all those magic circles and then all the right hieroglyphs, basically all the different magical runes and glyphs and stuff you can write down, and doing exactly these steps on exactly this moon phase and all that kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff people think about when they think of witchcraft. And a lot of people think that the better you get at doing all that pageantry, the stronger your magic gets. I'm going to say though that that's not exactly quite it. Y'all have heard me talk a bit with my friend Lucas, or the Devil's Advocate, a bit about, whether or not intention is really everything in magic. And one point Lucas made in that video was that a lot of this does have to do with actually relationship. And so again, we're starting here because I feel like that's the most foundational point in making your magic actually effective. And who the relationship is with is entirely dependent. You don't actually need to call upon any deities or spirits or angels or demons or whatever to do magic. I like to think of it kind of like the difference between, say, like a really good powered battery, like one of those chunky bitch batteries, and the difference between like a laptop charger. Hell, you can even just use a laptop charger battery. If you have a laptop, it can run on its own for quite a while. It can do things on its own. It can do anything that the laptop can do while it's plugged in, right? It can do all those kinds of functions, and even though some may take more power than others, or drain battery faster than others, it can still do it all. However, the real issue comes when the battery runs out. Once the battery runs out, that's it. Laptop shuts off. Processes shut down. Even on your phone, right? Like if you get to a certain percentage on your phone, eventually your phone will not let you do things like open the camera, will not let you do things like turn the flashlight on, right? So you lose a bit of function towards the end, but other than that, I mean, it can mostly operate as intended. But if you want non-stop, continuous, effective work, you gotta plug the laptop or the phone or whatever other battery into the wall. To me, that's not a perfect metaphor, but it works decently to explain the difference between a practitioner with no spirits, no guides, no nothing, and a practitioner with spirits, right? The spirit, the god, whatever it is, that is like your charger, basically. It plugs into the wall, that pretty much infinite supply of power, and your soul ends up being the adapter box that kind of flows that massive electrical power into whatever conduit device thing it is that you're trying to use. Maybe in this case we can actually call the laptop or the phone the spell itself, and then it needs that energy to function. So if you only have a little bit of energy, it might not work as well as if you had the whole amount of energy, or an appropriate amount. So if you've poured that energy into that spell, right, you charge it up a little bit, now it works great. But the soul itself is that adapter box so that you don't blow up your spell, right? I mean, if we think about, let's just say God in the Bible, anytime God himself acts directly, entire towns get wiped off the map. That power is kind of insane, right? That direct power is kind of ridiculous. And so in order for God to move a little bit more subtly in the world and maybe not blow up towns every 5 minutes, that laptop adapter box as soul metaphor means that we are basically channeling God's power down through us and into the spell that we're trying to do, especially as Christian witches, right? We become the hands and feet of God that way. We become the mystics that let God stay mysterious. And it's the same thing with a laptop. If you plugged a laptop battery directly into the wall of your house with no adapter, it would explode, because that's the purpose of the adapter in the first place, is to take that voltage from the wall, from the actual circuit, and take it into a level of power that the battery can actually handle in your laptop. So with that said, right, in order for you to plug into that power source, you have to have a relationship with it. And if we want to talk about effective magic, if we want to talk about actually getting into any kind of flow with our magic, that's where it starts. This is not to say that those who don't have any spirits don't have powerful magic. Again, let me say this very clearly before I get someone angrily typing in my comments. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that if you don't have a spirit to have a relationship with, you have to develop then a relationship with yourself, maybe your higher self, or maybe just with your own body, right? Because how do we replenish energy in our body? By sleeping, by eating right, by, sustaining our physical health alongside our mental health. The relationship stops becoming about you and some spirit, but just you and your own self, right? Likewise, what do spirits like gods often encourage us to do? They often encourage us to have discipline, to, live by righteous rules, to not be beholden to our vices, to build good habits of prayer and also of, health and all these other things. By following these, rules and or commands or decrees of our spirits, our deities, or just by acknowledging what we need to sustain ourselves, we build a relationship. And this is honestly, in my opinion, one of the first steps of actually gaining any kind of effective magic, because that way you're building that actual connection to the flow of energy you need for anything that you're going to do. Which, to that end, as a Christian witch, is something very interesting. As I was saying before, people normally, they think of those goofy little witchcraft books when they think of a witchcraft manual, but the further down this path you go and the deeper you get into the actual spirituality part of it, the more you realize that all of the people that witches normally think are pretty annoying, like ceremonial magicians, actually have a point. One of those folks is Damien Eccles. Damien Eccles has a really fascinating story that maybe we'll have to talk about another time, but this is a book specifically about angels, but he also has a book called High Magic, which is a book that deals with that kind of ceremonial magic. And you understand by, following in the footsteps of folks like this, that ceremonial magic, that magic itself, is really not just about like getting everything you ever wanted. It's really not. It's kind of a bait and switch there when we talk about magic and getting more powerful. And side note, this is kind of exactly what we talk about in Discerning Christian Witchcraft too. This is an intermediate book now as we talk about the contemplative mystical journey that goes behind all of the actual magic you do. That mysticism is the ceremonial magic, is all these things. And the focus of them, again, is not the goofy little things that you can do with witchcraft. The focus of this is self-improvement. And that's all that relationship hinges on, and that's all that you really need to do to make that little bit of goofy stuff you do better. Generally, ceremonial magicians will tell you that you should be doing like 80% magic that is spiritually aligning, right? That, opens yourself up to the source or whatever deities or spirits you're working with or anything like that, that basically tries to get you to come into contact with God, right? And why I say God with quotes, because when we think about God, if we're only thinking about one specific iteration of God isn't from the Bible, we're kind of missing about the, the infinity of him. So God, source, whatever you want to call it, this magic is meant to bring you in alignment with God, right? And so that's where you stop playing with the witchy books and start picking up books like this, which this book was put together by none other than Dr. Justin Sledge and his peer Dan Attrell here, translating some rarely talked about books from Henry Cornelius Agrippa, who wrote the 3 books of occult philosophy. And Agrippa's entire thing with occultism, with occult science, as I was talking about before, was finding ways to have those mystical kind of ecstatic experiences, to experience God, to get deeper into communion with God, but just in like a more empirical way, one might say, right? Where instead of just kind of standing around and waiting for God to hit you with something, you kind of coordinate the flow of energy to bring you into that state willingly and purposely. And when you start getting into books like that, you start realizing that, oh man, as much as you might have joked about ceremonial magicians for being stuffy before, the fact is that they actually have a great point. And that is that, again, real power doesn't come from being able to sling all these goofy spells around. Real power comes from your own self-mastery. And that's where this next part, I guess, is going. In order to have truly effective magic meaning that you know that when you conjure or cast a spell with God, that it's going to work, that like you don't have to doubt whether or not it's going to work. One of the big things in that is self-mastery, conquering your own fears, worries, doubts, and anything else that actually really does wreck and completely undermine your magic a lot more than you think it does. One great example that I can bring from my own journeys in this is actually before I got started playing around, with the infernal divine, as in demons. I had to deal with some of my own kind of flinchiness first, and the way I did that was with the angels, especially with Saint Michael the Archangel. Angels are one of those things that people are kind of more likely to start with, I think, just because, when we think of an angel, we think of someone that'll never hurt us, that'll never let us get hurt by anything else, that'll protect us, right, that'll guide us. So angels are easier to feel safe with right off the bat, and that's why, it was important for me, who had not yet done anything with the demons, to kind of figure that out with Archangel Michael. However, that does not mean that Archangel Michael, was cozy and cute with me. He did not go easy on me, I will say that. I started to get deeper into, just practicing meditation and practicing, trying to just commune directly with angels and so on, rather than just, constantly trying to just throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks with doing a bunch of spells. And so with that, I had many experiences where Michael would kind of put me in these little situations where they were all like mini tests and mini lessons at the same time. He would put me in situations to see if I would flinch, right? Show me some pretty scary things to see if I would flinch. And if I did flinch, he would work with me to kind of tamper that knee-jerk reaction out. If I saw something spooky, if I felt uneasy, basically that was a process of learning to just detach, let go, let things be as they be, and trust that no matter what happens, I would be fine because God was with me, you know, at the end of the day. Whether it was through the angels, whether it was just like the indwelling of God in my own self, I was going to be fine. There was no damage I could take that God couldn't fix. There was no harm any of these creatures could do that I could not overcome or get past, basically. Which was a hard lesson because obviously when something spooky's coming at you, your first instinct is to flinch, freak out, and just start burning everything down. But once I got past that and I was ready to kind of take my first steps with demons, and then I saw even wilder shit, and I had to deal with even wilder situations. Over time, that process really just kind of like desensitized me to a lot of my own fears, a lot of my own insecurities, a lot of my own feelings of smallness and feelings of helplessness. And while that seems like, you know, just like goofy little meditation and like it doesn't do anything concrete, it does. Because for many, many years when I had dreams where like there was something spooky in my dream, right? Like some kind of nightmare. I remember I would always try to like just use energy work, right? To just kind of like, just like in Skyrim, how they make those goofy little shields, right? With certain spells. I would try to like do energy work, which is a viable thing where I would just kind of push that force out and try to push them away. But in those dreams, nothing would ever happen. Nothing would happen. There was no magic. I didn't understand why. I didn't understand why my magic in these dreams would just never work and why nothing would happen, you know? It was like a sign of my lack of confidence and yet also a dent in what confidence I still had left at the same time. It wasn't good. But as I continued down this path and doing these things, I noticed a markable change, like a notable change in that in these dreams, they would still happen from time to time, and especially in sleep paralysis, which I think was happening because in the summer, my fiance streams and we need the air conditioner to go from the bedroom to the office. So the doors open and the light comes in, and I think that light makes me stay like somewhere between half awake and half asleep. Because in the summer, I would get a lot more sleep paralysis than I would in the winter when I could close the door. So nonetheless, in these fits of sleep paralysis, right, where you can't really move and stuff, you know, you'd see spooky things. It would be weird. You wouldn't like it. But there came a point where when I saw something like under my blankets in this kind of like fake bedroom, right, in the dream world, I saw some creature like hidden under the covers rummaging around, and instead of being afraid and instead of being helpless, I remember I actually sat up and I grabbed it and then it disappeared. And other examples, right, I mean, just recently I had a dream where there was a pretty horrifying looking spook, a pretty nasty looking, you know, Hollywood type demon, I guess. Some shit out of Bloodborne, I kid you not. And I didn't even feel afraid. I didn't feel afraid at all. And when I did the magic to exorcise that thing, it went away. It tried to fight back a little bit, of course, and for a second I was like kind of surprised because I was like, oh, that's right, it does have its own autonomy. It would fight back. That would make sense. But still, then I just kind of doubled down and then it was gone. And that was it. And that has never happened before. That has never happened in my dreams. Never, ever have I tried to protect myself in like an actual dream and it worked. But it did now. It does now, which is, I feel like, a sign that I've gotten a lot more comfortable with myself, with my relationship with God, with how the magic between us works. So number 2 is definitely working on, right, the spiritual discipline, the spiritual, aspects, that meditation of dealing with the self-mastery, working out a lot of, any kinds of issues, any kinds of false beliefs, any kinds of traumas or, issues, hang-ups, anything like that. And that's not going to look like fun, okay? When a ceremonial magician says 80% of the magic is that kind of stuff, that means that magic is not looking fun. And in fact, it might not even look like magic anymore. For me, like that looks like sitting in prayer with God, right? Praying the rosary could be part of this. Going through certain initiation systems like the Cliff Oath of occult, left-hand path type stuff, or even going to church regularly and just reading the Bible or reading contemplative books, learning, right? Setting yourself to a schedule and sticking to it, maintaining the temple of your body, right? Doing things that push you. Any kind of stuff like that. That doesn't look like magic. People wouldn't consider that magic, but it is. It is. It's transformative. It transforms you. It heals. It builds. It helps. And all of that contributes to building the energy that you're then going to put into that 20% little spell kind of goofiness. And self-mastery is a lifelong process. This is not something that you're going to finish just like in a month and then be like, I'm a perfect person, and then have like perfect magic. No. You're going to spend your entire life on this self-mastery train. Booble, what are you doing up here? Working through problems, analyzing your behaviors, analyzing how you feel, doing the meditations, doing the the visual guided things, working with spirits, letting them tell you, hey, you got to work on this, and then actually working on it. Those are the things that are really going to help you boost that magic. And honestly, like right after we get through stuff like energy work, where you actually get to feel the own energy in your body, I usually like to feel it, I imagine it in a little ball in my stomach, and it comes up and it comes down into my palms and it tingles there. You can feel it. You can feel it tingling there. When we have stuff like that, right? That's like one of those basic skills you will learn in the normal witch book, and that's good. But this brings us into the last thing, which is actually doing the spell, in which I'm going to actually kind of showcase a video of someone I really enjoy on TikTok, right, Adams, who had this very good point to make.
You might know how to craft a spell, but you don't know how to cast a spell. Several people asked me to elaborate on what I meant, and I will tell y'all what I tell everyone on my Patreon. So there's a bunch of different ways to access magic, but it comes down to two things: sensory deprivation and sensory overload. Now, I strongly believe that there is a third option, and that's drugs. But I'll give some examples. Meditation is one, but it's my least favorite. Dancing, moving your body, and chanting. Athletes call it being in the zone. But have you ever been so hyper-focused on something that you kind of snap out of it real quick and realize that your jaw is dropped and you're drooling? That is the headspace, the mentality, the altered state of consciousness where you can tap into magic. Now, it doesn't have to be that extreme. And with practice, you can do that really quickly, especially with sensory overload. Now, with my coven on Patreon, I've started pretty much coupling all the spells that I give with something to chant, because chanting is like the easiest way to use sensory overload to get your mind in the right headspace for that specific spell. So you're altering your mental state to a place where time stops, and the only thing that exists is whatever it is that you're doing. Again, athletes call it being in the zone. Now, all of that is just opening the door. That's just turning on the faucet for magic to flow. And there's another aspect to it that I call inner alchemy. I actually wrote a book called Inner Alchemy. It's no longer available. But basically, think of your thoughts, your emotions as part of the spell. In The Magicians, my favorite show ever, they call it internal circumstances. But you might better understand it as inner correspondences, ingredients to the spell. And every witch who really puts their foot on the gas knows this, even if they can't articulate it. Now, again, with my coven on Patreon, I've been coupling a lot of verbal spells and chants with our spell work. And I've been doing that to help hone in the intention and also evoke the right thoughts and emotions for that particular spell. And then also it's fun to read off a charmed-like spell. So if you're casting a spell for happiness, you need to think happy thoughts and feel happy things. If you're doing hex work, you need to feel what you're putting that person through. And then there's also your willpower and energy work, which I think when you're using them, I think that they tend to go hand in hand. Like, you really need your willpower to do energy work. You have to tap into the right energy and will that spell into existence, thus casting the spell. I think I did a really good job explaining that. But now, having learned all this, you can see why it's a lot more work than just lighting the candle. And why any witch who puts their foot on the gas knows that these $10 curses on Etsy are scams. I'm not going to stop shitting on Etsy, y'all. You hoes need to raise your prices and put in the work. Oh, and real quick, I'm not talking out of my ass. This is years of research. This knowledge is from legitimate books and sources, as well as my tenure as a witch. It is not just personal beliefs and opinions.
And it is true, right? It's true. You know, when we think about magic, I think a lot of people get stuck on like, you know, the ingredients you need or the tools, but then not actually the process of going through it. And one thing that really helped me make my magic more effective is understanding that my magic is like a single man's sermon, you know? It can feel really hard to like organize your rituals right or to organize your spells correctly. It can feel really difficult to understand everything's place in the ritual, right? Especially as a Christian witch, because we understand that, well, actually, this isn't just Christian witches, this is really anyone. We understand that our power in a spell isn't coming from the actual like herbs and spices and random shit that we're using. It's coming from the source, the creator of all, in our case, God. And these other things are, depending on how animistic you want to get, either just focusing points to basically give form to abstract ideas, like for example, amethyst for wisdom, or I don't know, garnet for love, or something like that. Or if you're more animistic, they are pieces of God's creation, our siblings in creation, who, just like saints and angels, can offer up praises to God, can offer up, requests to God. And so join us in our prayers, lending their own energy into ours to ask God to bless things. That might sound like, well, duh, to some people, in which case I envy you, because that took me so long to figure out. So now, whether it's something as simple as like blessing my morning latte, you know, and invoking all of the allspice and whatever that I put in that coffee, whether it is sitting down to a big ritual like my monthly prosperity spells, I understand them to be points where I'm offering something up to God, offering parts of myself, right, my energy or anything up, like offering myself up as living sacrifice, as the Bible actually says to do, and in return, opening the door to that connection with God to flow down that miracle, right, through that laptop charger analogy. And that helps a lot also, like actually getting the energy, actually sending it up, actually getting something back down, and actually infusing it. And more, it also gives me a way to organize my ritual, right? I think another thing that gets people kind of feeling silly is that, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes doing spells and doing, especially if you're doing the old school spells with the whole like draw the circle and stand up here and do the whole thing, the whole song and dance, it might feel a little goofy, might feel a little silly. And if you feel silly, chances are that your confidence in what you're doing might not be that awesome. So finding a format that works for you is big, because you can get over that kind of feeling of goofiness. Me organizing my spells as a 3-part like single man sermon really helps me to, you know, get in the prayers, get the mise en scène going, pace myself, and really build that energy, just like a liturgical church service would before the Eucharist is made, all that kind of stuff. It helps actually build up, orchestrate, and then use the energy. That's the part people don't often talk about. They always talk about what you need, but never how to actually feel the flow of energy and pull it up and put it down and actually imbue it into things, seeing it seep into things, right? Imagining it just spawning or going in, however it is that happens to you, and knowing, and this is the last part to building that magic, knowing that it has worked, knowing that whatever needs to happen as a result of your efforts will happen. It could be that you asked for something that God decides you're not ready for yet, and that your efforts are delayed, or that they don't come to fruition at all. That's okay. Your spell still worked. Your spell still did what it was supposed to do, which is get you what you needed, not necessarily what you wanted. Sometimes what we want is stupid, and we have to accept that. Just like you wouldn't, consider it a failure of parenting if a kid asked 100 times to eat candy for breakfast and the parent said no each and every time. Doesn't make it a failure of God if your spell doesn't work when you do the same love spell on that broke-ass boy you shouldn't be seeing 20 fucking times. Stop doing that. It also does kind of mean, though, because you're getting closer to God and getting a better understanding of His will and what you need to be doing and all this kind of stuff, it doesn't mean that the chances of you trying to cast a spell that He's not about actually goes down in the first place. Because if you know what He wants for you and you know what you have to do, you're not going to ask for the opposite. You're not going to even want to ask for the opposite. Your will is going to come closer and closer into alignment with God's. And that's, I think, a part of the process of union in mysticism. Not only merging yourself with God, but merging your will with God's will, putting that will first, right? And that means when you do cast a spell, you know that what you're doing is going to work. Because you already know that God is working through you. And it's that knowing, it's that confidence, it's that trust that God has your back, that if you're not supposed to be doing that, it's either going to be shelved or not work. And if it is what you're supposed to be doing, which you think it is, it's going to work. That's really what makes it effective. Anyway, I don't know. All of these tips made sense to me. But if they didn't make sense to you, or you still can't conceptualize what this would mean, let me know in the comments. All I know is, to give you a quick rundown, what I can say is build a relationship, either with the spirits or yourself. And that relationship, of course, includes developing that kind of discipline, that dedication to the spirits and their wishes for you, which usually are health, happiness, and, temperance, right? And then also some self-mastery, getting past your traumas, your religious trauma, your fears, your worries, your anxieties, really not running away from them anymore, trying to constantly banishing them, but turning around and facing them head on and dispelling them directly. And then also after that, finding a ritual system and a ritual philosophy that will help you actually make use of your tools to not just have a bunch of, fun toys all over the place, but to really recruit your siblings in creation and bring all of that, orchestrate that energy together to properly imbue it into your energy, into your spell. Some might say, in a Christian tradition, right, that laying on of hands is a transfer of energy. That's a very important thing. So, right, figure that out. And then at the end, just continue to learn, continue to grow, continue to get new ideas and wrestle with them. Continue to integrate new experiences and ideas into your framework, and walk with some confidence that, yes, indeed, you are a conduit of the Most High's miracle. That knowledge means that you're not going to abuse that power, because that's how you lose it real fucking fast. And also, it's going to keep you humble, because you know that it's not really you at the end of the day, right? If one is to boast, they should boast in the Lord. It's not really you who's out there doing the flashy, like, Power Rangers type shit. It's God who is blessing you with the ability to transfer that miracle out into the world. It just makes you a more level-headed person, a more level-headed, a more secure, a more stable, a more disciplined and focused and sure person when you get to this point. And when you get to that point, that's where magic really just, that little 20% of goofy stuff like money spells or whatever, or little luck charms, or, little goofy things like making traffic lights turn green or stay green a little bit longer. It's just the cherry on top, basically, of the real beauty of having this kind of practice in the first place. We talk about the mystic journey all over in Discerning Christian Witchcraft, so if you have not pre-ordered that already, I highly suggest you do. But otherwise, I will see you guys next time for some good chats, and I am off to go get my little witch on with my friends. See ya.